When you picture the absolute cutting edge of human technology, you probably have a very specific image in your head. Like if you were thinking about quantum computers or neural implants, you are probably picturing this environment that looks like a sci-fi movie. A billion-dollar, hyper-sterilized laboratory.
Right, exactly. It's an environment of pure artificial extremity. Because to build the hardware for aerospace or quantum computing, the tech industry creates what is best described as a thermal hell.
A thermal hell.
Yeah, I mean, you are subjecting these super toxic gases to vacuum chambers, cranking the temperature up past 1,000 degrees, and doing it all in these pristine, clean rooms where a single rogue speck of dust can ruin years of engineering.
Right, and you look at that setup, and there is this built-in expectation of how the future is supposed to be constructed. It has to be pristine, synthetic, and, born out of a sterile vacuum.
This is how we've done it for decades.
Exactly. But then you look at the exact opposite end of the spectrum. I want you to imagine the humidity, the biting cold, and the thick morning fog of a traditional agricultural farm.
It's a bit of a pivot, yeah.
A huge pivot. We are talking about a coffee plantation, specifically up in the mountains of the Cartago province in Costa Rica. You have muddy boots, organic waste, and just piles of discarded wood and roots rotting in the damp air.
Just sitting right out there in the elements.
Right, and yet sitting right there, hiding entirely in plain sight inside the trash of that foggy coffee farm, is the architectural blueprint for the era of quantum computing.
It is a contrast that completely defies all the industrial logic we have been taught to accept.
It really does.
I mean, under our current paradigm, those two universes, the hypersterile laboratory and the damp agricultural waste pile, they should never intersect.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the mission of our deep dive today is to explore exactly how that boundary is being erased. We are going to look at how biomass, specifically the roots and the pruning wood of the Arabica coffee shrub, is solving the most severe bottlenecks in modern materials science.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is, and we are pulling this from a fascinating doctoral thesis on nanotechnology and advanced materials science, written by the Costa Rican scientist Martín Gutiérrez Guerrero. He's the CEO of Nova Amazonia.
And, what gives this thesis such high value for us today is that it avoids mere theoretical speculation.
It's not just a bunch of math on a chalkboard.
Exactly. This research has profound, real-world applications that are disrupting how we think about the intersection of biology and hardware right this second.
Which brings us to the ultimate test of that intersection, because having a quantum computer sitting on a desk in a temperature-controlled room is one thing. But what happens when we take these advanced futuristic materials and try to put them inside the human body?
That is the big question.
Right. Let's talk about brain-computer interfaces. Companies like Neuralink are in the news constantly, trying to connect artificial hardware directly to the human brain.
And that is exactly where the entire industry hits a frustrating roadblock.
A massive one.
Yeah, the medical materials sector has struggled with this for years because regardless of how brilliant the software is or how delicate the surgical robots are, these projects consistently crash headfirst into an immunological wall.
Before we get into why they crash, I need you to help me connect the dots on the material itself. We hear a lot about graphene. It is touted as the wonder material of the century.
Oh, absolutely.
So just for a baseline, what actually is graphene and why is everyone trying to put it into the human brain?
Well, at its core, graphene is a single layer of carbon atoms arranged in a two-dimensional honeycomb lattice.
Like chicken wire.
Yeah, exactly like chicken wire. But it is essentially one atom thick. And because of that unique structure, it is highly conductive, immensely strong, and very flexible.
Which sounds perfect for the brain.
On paper, graphene is the flawless candidate. When you are trying to read the delicate electrical signals of human neurons, you need a material that can transmit those tiny electrical impulses perfectly without degrading.
So if traditional synthetic graphene is the perfect electrical conductor, why do these brain implants fail within just a few months of being surgically installed? I mean, why does the body reject them?
They fail because of the toxic residue left behind by the manufacturing process.
Toxic residue.
Yeah. The reality of traditional synthetic graphene is that it is incredibly messy to make. The most common method is called chemical vapor deposition.
Okay, what does that actually look like?
Basically, manufacturers take a sheet of copper, heat it up to extreme temperatures in a vacuum, and introduce a carbon-rich gas.
So the thermal hell we talked about earlier.
Exactly. The carbon atoms settle onto the copper and form that beautiful honeycomb lattice.
Okay, so you have a perfect sheet of carbon, but it is stuck to a piece of copper. How do you get it off?
That is where the problem starts. To separate the graphene from the copper substrate, manufacturers have to bathe it in highly abrasive toxic chemicals.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they use substances like benzene, hydrazine, and potent acid baths to essentially eat away the copper so only the graphene remains.
So even before this state-of-the-art material gets anywhere near a hospital, it is being washed in poison just to make it usable.
Yes, and obviously the laboratories know this is a problem for medical use.
I would hope so.
Right, so they put the graphene through rigorous cleaning protocols, attempting to purify it at a molecular level.
Yeah.
But the fundamental flaw is that you can never wash it all away.
It's just baked in.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Microscopic traces of those heavy metals and chemical solvents always remain embedded in the carbon structure. It is inescapable.
Okay, so picture this scenario. A surgeon takes the sophisticated, traditional synthetic graphene mesh, and they place it directly into the human cerebral cortex. What actually happens at the cellular level in that moment?
The reaction is instantaneous. I mean, the human body is a highly tuned sensor. When that material enters the cerebral cortex, the immune system dispatches cells called macrophages to inspect the new object.
And what do they find?
Well, these macrophages detect those microscopic traces of heavy metals and acids. They do not see a miracle of modern engineering. They register a lethal chemical threat.
So they freak out.
Totally. This triggers a localized chemical alarm within the brain.
It sounds like a microscopic fortress defense.
Yeah.
The alarm sounds of the guards rush the gates and they try to dismantle the siege engine that was just dropped into their territory.
That's a great way to describe it. It is a highly aggressive response known as cytotoxicity. The body's natural instinct is to destroy the foreign invader at all costs.
By doing what exactly?
It releases an enzyme trying to break down the object and flush it out of the system to protect the surrounding healthy brain tissue.
But they cannot dismantle it, right? Because they are attacking a synthetic carbon mesh.
Right.
The human body does not have the biological tools to just dissolve a sheet of synthetic graphene.
Precisely. The macrophages quickly reach a stalemate. They simply cannot chemically break down the synthetic mesh. So the immune system pivots to a secondary defense strategy.
Which is?
If it cannot destroy the threat, it decides to isolate it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the surrounding tissues begin to rapidly construct a thick, dense wall of scar tissue entirely around the implant, effectively quarantining it from the healthy brain tissue.
Wow. And I mean, while that is a brilliant survival mechanism for human biology, it is a disaster for the technology.
An absolute disaster.
The entire point of these implants is to listen to the electrical signals of the brain. But if the implant is suddenly buried under a thick blanket of dense scar tissue, those delicate signals cannot get through.
Exactly. The implant becomes completely isolated. It is cut off from the electrical activity it was designed to monitor.
It just goes dark.
It goes deaf and blind to the brain. In the end, despite the billions of dollars and years of research, that state-of-the-art neural lace turns into nothing more than a useless piece of scrap metal sitting in the patient's head.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because this specific failure of synthetic graphene leads us directly back to the foggy mountains of Costa Rica.
It does.
It brings us to the botanical properties of what the source calls coffee graphene.
And this is where Martin Gutierrez Guerrero's research just flips the script on materials science entirely.
How so?
Because coffee graphene is derived from the biomass of the coffee plant, the manufacturing process is fundamentally different. You are not growing carbon gas on a copper plate.
Right, no chemical vapor deposition.
Exactly. Instead, you are extracting carbon from the plant itself through thermal purification.
Wait, let me stop you there. If we are just taking coffee wood and heating it up, aren't we just making charcoal? I mean, how do you go from a pruned branch to a high-tech conductive mesh?
That is a great question. You're not just tossing branches into a fire. When they process this coffee biomass, they are specifically isolating a complex organic polymer called lignin.
Lignin, okay.
Yeah, lignin is the material that forms the structural cell walls of plants. It is what makes wood rigid.
Got it.
Once they isolate the lignin, they subject it to controlled thermal purification. This isn't burning. It is a highly precise application of heat in an oxygen-free environment that strips away the non-carbon elements, leaving behind a pure carbon structure.
So because you are starting with organic lignin and using heat instead of acid to purify it, you bypass the chemical bath entirely.
Exactly.
There is no copper, there is no benzene.
None. Zero. It is inherently clean from the exact moment it is formed.
That's incredible.
It is. And when you introduce this biologically sourced graphene into the body, there is no residual acid or solvent to trigger that chemical alarm.
So the body doesn't freak out.
The macrophages do not detect poison, so that initial wave of aggressive cytotoxicity simply never happens.
But the report goes further than just the chemistry, and to me, this is the most astonishing discovery in the entire
Oh,
thesis.
the structural aspect.
Yes, the secret to why this coffee graphene works isn't just about it being chemically clean. It is about something much more structural. It is geometric.
What's fascinating here is the physical architecture of the material itself. When this purified lignin is transformed into graphene, it actually retains a specific plant porosity.
Okay, porosity, meaning the holes in it.
Yeah, the dimensions of these microscopic pores, the physical three-dimensional spacing of the carbon structure, they happen to match the exact dimensions of the human extracellular matrix.
Hold on, let's define that for a second. The extracellular matrix, what exactly does that look like in the body?
You can think of the extracellular matrix as the biological scaffolding that exists between our cells.
Okay.
It is a three-dimensional web of proteins and carbohydrates. Every organ, every tissue in your body relies on this physical framework to organize its cells, give them structural support, and allow them to communicate.
So human cells need a very specific physical jungle gym to climb on and grow.
Yes, that's a perfect analogy.
And what you were saying is that the three-dimensional geometry of this coffee-derived graphene perfectly mimics that human biological jungle gym.
Exactly. It is an architectural match that completely fools human biology.
Going back to our security guard analogy, when a traditional implant shows up, the macrophages, the security guards, are expecting a cold, flat, hostile metal plate.
Right. They immediately recognize the shape as a foreign invader.
But with the coffee graphene, the security guards show up to inspect the new arrival, and instead of a hostile metal plate, they find an organic, porous scaffolding that looks exactly like their own neighborhood.
That is exactly the way to visualize it. The body literally scans the material and perceives its own native architectural language.
Wow.
It does not register the geometry as strange or foreign. The researchers call this an absence of geometric dissonance.
Geometric dissonance.
Yeah. And when you combine the lack of chemical toxins with a matching physical geometry, you create an unprecedented clinical reality.
Because there is no chemical alarm bell and no geometric red flag, the inflammatory response is suppressed.
Completely suppressed.
The security guards just nod and walk right past it. But what happens next? If the body doesn't build a wall of scar tissue around it, how does the brain interact with this coffee graphene?
Well, the clinical studies documented in the research report something staggering. When this botanical graphene is introduced to neural environments, the surrounding biology does not recoil.
It doesn't back away.
No. The neurons and the nerve endings actually begin to grow naturally. Because the scaffolding feels familiar, they reach out and intertwine directly through the carbon network of the graphene.
Wait, really? So the brain cells are physically growing into and through the computer hardware?
Yes. The hardware and the living organic tissue fuse together without rejection.
That is just, wow.
The biological signals flow freely into the electrical pathways of the graphene, and the electrical impulses of the graphene can seamlessly interact with the biological tissue.
A brain surgeon is essentially implanting high-tech burnt coffee into your head, and your brain just embraces it.
Pretty much.
That borders on science fiction. We are talking about true biological integration of machine and mind, and the key to unlocking it was the microscopic shape of a piece of discarded coffee wood. It is genuinely hard to wrap your head around.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the implications shift from the cellular level to the macroeconomic scale.
Right, because this scales up massively.
Exactly. Because this material is biologically perfect and because it is derived from agricultural waste, the entire way we source the raw materials for advanced technology is about to flip global economics on its head.
We have to look at the historical context to really appreciate how big of a pivot this is. Traditionally, how have we sourced the raw materials for our electronics?
For centuries, the dominant global economies have relied on a brutal model of extraction.
Mining.
Yeah. To maintain technological superiority, they have had to dig massive mines, largely concentrated in the global south. We are talking about extracting resources like cobalt, lithium, and silicon.
Very dirty process.
Incredibly dirty.
Yeah.
It's a process that physically tears apart the earth, devastates ecosystems, and relies on highly complex, often exploitative global supply chains. You dig a hole, take the mineral, and ship it across the world.
It is the ultimate brute force approach to progress. But this research introduces a new economic concept from the sources: bioshoring.
Right, and bioshoring is a fundamental reimagining of resource acquisition.
How does it work?
Instead of ripping finite minerals out of the subsoil and exporting them cheaply, economies can pivot to capitalizing on what naturally grows on the surface. You move from a model of destructive extraction to a model of sustainable harvesting.
Let's look at the numbers provided in the research to understand the scale of this.
Yeah.
Let's take Costa Rica. Geographically, it is a very small country.
Right, tiny compared to massive mining hubs.
But according to the sources, Costa Rica alone generates roughly 150,000 tons of coffee pruning wood every single year.
150,000 tons of a material that historically had zero technological value.
Right. For generations, farmers would prune their Arabica coffee shrubs just to keep the plants healthy, and all that leftover wood and root mass was considered agricultural trash.
It was waste.
The standard practice was to gather it up in a pile and just burn it.
And suddenly, that burned trash is recognized as the ideal raw material for the most advanced computing and medical hardware on the planet.
It changes everything.
Geopolitically, this synthesizes into a major shift in power dynamics. It transforms these tropical agricultural zones from being mere exporters of a morning beverage into the holders of new global technological sovereignty.
Okay, pause. I need to challenge a statistic from the report because it genuinely sounds like a typo.
Oh, the valuation.
Yeah, so what does this all mean? The report states that the market value of this newly emerging biogenic materials industry is projected to reach $2.8 trillion by the year 2035.
Yeah.
$2.8 trillion. I mean, how does processed coffee waste reach a valuation like that?
It sounds staggering until you look at what this material replaces.
Okay, replace what?
It isn't just about making a slightly better microchip. This coffee graphene has the potential to replace traditional silicon in computing, replace toxic heavy metals in batteries, and completely monopolize the medical implant industry because it is the only material the human body won't reject.
Oh, wow. So it's hitting multiple massive industries at once.
Exactly. When you add up the global semiconductor market, the biomedical device market, and the next generation energy storage market, $2.8 trillion is actually a very grounded projection.
It proves that the future of advanced technology isn't inevitably tied to digging deeper, more destructive holes in the ground.
Not at all.
It is tied to understanding and utilizing the complex biological architectures that already exist around us, regenerating themselves season after season.
It validates the concept of bioshoring entirely.
It really shifts how you look at the world. Because the next time you pour yourself a cup of morning coffee, or, if you see a picture of one of those foggy mountainous farms in Costa Rica, you are no longer just looking at the source of a caffeine boost.
Right.
You are looking at the exact biological material that will safely wire the next generation of supercomputers directly into the human brain. And it is doing it by completely bypassing the toxic, environmentally destructive supply chains of the past.
This raises an important question, and it is something worth mulling over long after we wrap up today.
What's that?
Well, if the discarded wood of an everyday coffee plant just happens to perfectly mimic the complex architectural geometry of the human brain's extracellular matrix, what other weeds or piles of agricultural waste sitting in our backyards currently possess the exact geometric blueprint required to solve the next impossible technological hurdle?
We might literally be burning the blueprints to the future just because we haven't bothered to look at them closely enough yet. That is a wild thought. Well, that is all the time we have for our deep dive today. Keep questioning the world around you, keep looking closely at the things you have been told are just waste, and we will catch you next time.